Well, it's that time once again. It's time for another year of Castlevania Month. And I have some excellent things planned this year, so I hope you stick around and enjoy as we delve further into the legacy of the Belmonts. And speaking of which, it's time we talked about arguably the most popular Belmont, Simon. Now, I've talked about Simon multiple times before in the past, but here I'm going to talk about something a little bit different. I'm sure most of us have played the Super Nintendo classic, Super Castlevania IV. A reimagining and retelling of the original game, it is packed to the brim with brand new content never before seen in a Castlevania game. However, what if it wasn't a remake? What if instead it was a direct sequel to Castlevania II Simon's Quest? Now, I know that may seem a little far-fetched, but bear with me here. In the good ending of Castlevania II Simon's Quest, at the very end we see Dracula's hand rise from the grave. Now, why would that happen in the good ending? Some say it signifies the next Belmont to defeat Dracula, but I think it's setting up for one final journey for Simon. Konami themselves has said that Castlevania IV is different enough that it can be considered its own game instead of a remake, so I'm going to take that idea and run with it. That's right, folks. Today, I'm making Castlevania IV canon. And there's a lot of evidence to support my claim here. For example, as stated before, the game is different enough to be considered its own game rather than a remake, especially because there are two other remakes of the first game. So let's imagine here that this takes place, let's say, 2 years after Simon's Quest. Dracula rises from the grave and Simon has to set off yet again to put him in his place. Over the course of 2 Castlevania games, Simon has gotten a lot more skillful with his whip, as can be seen in the gameplay. Also, take into consideration that on the box art, Simon looks significantly older. But this could also just be a design choice, but I like to think he's older. Plus, viewing it as a sequel makes the ending far more climactic as it plays the theme songs from Simon's previous 2 adventures, as well as Trevor's, but that's beside the point. And speaking of climactic, think about how cool it is to have Simon's theme playing during the final battle against Dracula. This is their true final fight, you know, 3rd time's the charm. Simon's taking him on for a 3rd time in a row, stakes are high, and his theme song's playing. Think about how cool it is when viewing it as a sequel. Plus, if they wanted to remake the game, they could have just called it Super Castlevania. But no, they called it Super Castlevania IV. It wouldn't be called 4 if it wasn't a sequel. But yeah, I know it's not actually a sequel, but you can view it that way. And it really doesn't make much of a difference. The events of the Castlevania timeline still play out the same way. The only difference is now there's one more adventure for Simon in between Castlevania II and Castlevania Harmony of Dissonance. For me, I like to view this game as a sequel because it just adds more to Simon. Not that he needed it, he's already a complete badass, but you know, adding more to him, it's just something a little extra. You can view it however you like, but the bottom line is this game is awesome. It's truly one of the best games and one of the greatest adventures for Simon Belmont. I like to view this game as a sequel, and if you too choose to believe that, it adds so much more to the legacy of Simon Belmont, which is why I like to view it this way. So, keep this in mind. Next time you play Castlevania IV, think about it as a true follow-up to Castlevania II, and maybe you'll notice some things a little different.